and I first went to Mongolia 14 years ago, so that's already 2004. We had no idea we would be there that long, or that we would still think of continuing. But we still feel that there's a place for us there. And in addition to that, we have also really grown to love the Mongolian people and Mongolian land. So today's presentation will be sort of a blend of the country of Mongolia as well as some of the work we do there. And knowing that Rotary is also a service organization, we just thought we'd highlight maybe a couple things where Mongolia is seeking to develop further socially. Okay, so where is Mongolia? As you can see, Mongolia is between China and Russia. They have no other neighbors. The size of Mongolia fits about 13 times into Canada. So it's actually a fairly large landmass as countries go. I think it's the 13th largest country. 17th largest country. But the population is only about 3 million people. Okay? There are about 60 million domesticated animals, but 3 million people. And about half of them live in the city of Ulaanbaatar. And this photo was taken on a nice day, and you can see the city is nestled in a beautiful valley surrounded by hills. So on a beautiful days, it's a really beautiful city. Over half the population is quite young, about 25 years of age and lower. So you can probably tell from the photo there, this is in the main square of the capital city, and the government buildings are in the background. And a lot of people, when they think of Mongolia, and we will show you some pictures, beautiful, vast landscapes, animals, small tents. Mongolians call them gers. Most people are familiar with the Russian term called yurt. But half the population lives here, which is a growing city, and increasing number of people living in buildings and apartment buildings. And also, as you can see, growing modernization. So this is a night shot in the city center. This one is actually taken out of our window, and it really shows a growing city where you've got traffic congestion, you've got modern buildings, and you also have hillsides where people are trying to claim a piece of land and build them a life for themselves in the city. This photo here is taken on a very clear day in winter, and just go up here. So you can see part of the main city, which runs through the valley. And I don't know how well you can see this, but these are what they call the ger districts, or the yurt districts. And they used to all be those gers, those round tents. But now people are building buildings. And in these areas, they just build on the land. So there's no sewage, there's no water, and there is now more electrical lines brought in here. Sometimes the electrical lines, like many developing countries, are kind of strung off from the main line to feed a house that's not necessarily registered for electricity. Yeah, so that just gives you an idea. So a lot of this area is not lit. At night it will look dark, but actually there's a huge population living on the hillsides. And so I mentioned earlier that the city of Ulaanbaatar is in a valley, and it's surrounded by hills. So we often get what's called temperature inversions, where you've got basically your air is pressed down. And so all the pollution stays locked within the valley. And that can happen any time of year. Winter, it's particularly terrible because Mongolia is a northern country, and so we have temperatures of minus 20, 30, 40 degrees Celsius. And so people are burning coal. The poor people, if they don't have enough money for coal, they burn garbage, they burn tires. You've got lots of traffic congestion. Oh, can you go back one, Sam? And you also have power plants that are built in the center of the city. So you can imagine the toxic mess that it becomes in winter. I should mention this is actually, it was quite efficient when the population was small because they run the excess heat from the power plant, and that superheats the water, and that's how this, all the apartment buildings are heated during winter, and that's where we get hot water. So in some ways it's efficient, but it creates a real toxic mess for air pollution. This, I don't know if you can see it, but there's actually houses here. And you can see above the smog one of the smokestacks. And then we have air quality indicators now. So I didn't check what Kenora was, but most of Canada tends to be no more than 50 for air quality index that's set by the World Health Organization. This is a day in winter, and the lowest is 736, and the top is 3,715. So as you can tell, some days it's really, really hazardous in the city.
What, on the scale, what is the top scale?
The top scale here is 500. So we're reading 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, upper 3,000 here. Yeah. So that's human-created air pollution, but some of you may have heard of something called the Gobi Desert that's in the south of Mongolia, the north of China, and so we also get a lot of sands that will sometimes blow. And so this is a beautiful, clear, sunny day, but there's sand blowing, and so this is something we also have to deal with. Oh, yeah. So this is a more close-up with the Gare district, so you can see it's just kind of in some ways haphazardly put together. There's not a lot of urban planning the way they develop. And you've got the combination of the traditional gares, you've got the houses, you've got the outhouses, yeah, the little latrines. So you've got all this within the Gare districts. And a lot of wells are situated throughout the city. Some have been sponsored by World Vision, some have been sponsored by some other organizations. And you'll see actually about 50% of the people getting water are the children. And they get these big barrels and they put them on the carts. Can you go back one, Sam? And then they wheel them up these hills, which are actually fairly steep. So there's living in the Gare districts is very time consuming because everyone has to haul their own water.
Notice the streets and think of winter.
Oh, now this, yeah, right. This is a nice dry summer picture. You can imagine what it's like in a rain. You can imagine what it's like after rains because they get really rutted. And you can also perhaps imagine, being a snowy country too, what it's like in winter and what happens with lots of traffic and ice, and you're still hauling water every day by hand as well. So that's just a tiny insight into life in the Gare districts. One thing about Mongolians is that they love education. They really value it. One of the things that was good about the communist era, in a sense, was that they helped develop education. So before Mongolians never got advanced further, when the communists came, they developed a national system for health and education. This was actually a graduation I attended recently. We helped sponsor a young lady from a poorer family who really wanted to study medicine and without scholarship would otherwise never have been able to do that. So this is her graduation ceremony. So that's the older young, but as we mentioned, more than 50% are younger than age 25. And so kindergartens is a huge need. Now the Mongolians say it's harder to get into kindergarten than it is to get into university. There are parents we know who have stood in line for 24 hours, camped out in a line to try and ensure that their child gets into kindergarten. So this actually is a picture of a kindergarten that was sponsored by a development agency in Sweden. So my area is healthcare. I'm a nurse. I'm currently studying for my PhD. And I was very grateful for a university professor in England who said, I don't know about Mongolia, but let's work together and get some research from Mongolia so that we can have it out there and more people can know about it. So this is a picture of mid-level. It'd kind of be like Lake of the Woods Hospital. So you send your specialists into Winnipeg for the upper level, and this hospital provides good mid-level service, and that's what this one would be like. And buildings are quite old, but they do work hard to maintain and keep them. So basically what I'm doing is I'm studying about Mongolian nurses. What are their roles? What are their responsibilities? Because Mongolia really wants to transition to a more Western-based system. And they're trying to figure out how do we advance the nursing profession. So what I'm hoping to do is provide a baseline description of what they do, compare it with international literature, and then let the Mongolian people decide what they want to do to take the profession further. This one is in a top-level hospital. It's nursing desk area, and so you can see that they're already in some hospitals. This is one of the top ones in the country, but you're starting to get some computer monitors, and they've been doing charting, electronic charting now in this hospital for 1 year. So some advances are being made. They take great pride in their work, and they also work extremely hard. So this photo was taken on Nursing Day this year, International Nurses Day on May 12th. And these were nurses that I got to know at one of the hospitals I visited. And so once a year they have big celebrations, and it's also mandated by the government. So the government says, this is International Nurses Day. You need to have your celebrations. Actually, go one more and then we'll go back to this. And so you can see here, what have they done for Nursing Day? So they've done information. It was focused on nutrition, so they talked about different diets. They did teaching within the hospital, here up on the wards. They went to schools here. So they did a number of things. They also had Research Day. So every year, nurses have competitions where they present research. And then I also helped out with some continuing education activities. Can you back up?
Back or forward?
Back. Okay. So if you're curious to know what nurses do, and you have to understand, I'm just in my very preliminary stages of research. Ask me in a couple of years, I'll have more information for you. But a lot of what they do is medication administration. So there's a lot of injections. Mongolians like injections, they like IVs, and so that tends to be what's prescribed, and that tends to take up a lot of time because it's a physical task for the nurses. They also spend a lot of time charting, which our nurses here do. With the introduction of the electronic charting systems, sometimes we find they almost still have to double chart because they're still reliant on the old while they're going to the new. So some of these issues I think are probably similar in other countries. One thing that surprised me was they actually have to do a fair bit of accounting. And so when a patient is being discharged from a state-funded hospital, the nurses have to tally up if they had an antibiotic twice a day for 7 days, because they have long stays in Mongolia, then how much per dose, and they calculate it and then send that all to billing. So that's one of the jobs that nurses do that they don't do here.
Patient load and ratio.
Okay. All right, so the patient load, if you're a nurse in Mongolia, let's say if you're a nurse in Canada, I think on average you have between 6 to 8 patients, maybe on average. In Mongolia, if you're a nurse, you have between 15 to 40 and sometimes up to 50 patients. So you can see why, if they're all receiving medications, that takes up the bulk of their responsibilities. And they also end up having, with the charting, to work significant amounts of time over what their shift is. And they do that without charge. So they work till they complete their work. If they're scheduled for an 8-hour shift and they work 10, they only get paid for 8 hours. If they work a 16-hour shift, which is a standard night shift, they get paid the same amount per hour as in the day. No overtime, no differential. Same when they work 24-hour shift. So there are a lot of different issues that nursing has there, and it will be very interesting to see how they move forward. Oh, I was going to say one other thing about nursing in Mongolia and medicine is that the ratio of doctors to nurses is about almost 1-to-1. So you can imagine then that a lot of the responsibilities nurses do here, doctors are doing in Mongolia. So I'm curious to see how they're going to develop further in the future.
So yes, Mongolians are traditionally a nomadic culture. They have for very many years herded sheep and goats, yaks, camels, horses, and cows. And as Anne mentioned, somewhere between 60 to 75 million animals at the last census. So just some scenes from around in the herding. These camels, the Mongolian camels are the two-humped Bactrian camel. When we visit schools, I tell the kids that they're winter camels. You sit between those humps, there's a heater in front of you and a heater behind you. For those of you that have been in the Middle East, those nice one-hump things, they get you way up high in the cool breezes, they're summer camels. Mongolians love their horses. The Mongolians think of horses as their wealth. They will usually try and keep a number of them around. They do an awful lot of horse racing. A Mongolian horse race is like nothing you've seen here in North America at all. In Mongolia, the 2-year-olds will race for about 12 kilometers, and then the much older horses, 5 years and up, and the stallions will race for about 26 kilometers. And the jockeys are children between the ages of 7 and 12. And it's very innovative and a progress that just in the last 2 or 3 years, the government mandated that children could not be younger than 7. Okay, they also have to wear helmets as a safety feature. So things are changing and improving. This is just a herder's site. My wife was on a trip earlier this spring with one of her sisters, and this is a family that they stopped in to visit. Please notice, even in the countryside, they've got some solar panels and a satellite dish. They do appreciate having something to do in the evenings and actually in the afternoons, because one of the things Mongolians really like is to watch sumo wrestling. Because anyone know what sumo wrestling is? Yeah. Usually for the last 20 or so years, about 4 to 6 of the top 10 sumo wrestlers have been Mongolians. This is the inside of a ger. The inside of a ger is usually fairly traditional. The picture is being taken from the men's side of the ger. And it's looking across, it's looking across. The stove is usually in the front, half, and it faces the woman's side. She's the one who's expected to get up and keep it going through the winter nights. And it's also handy for cooking and so on that way.
This is her kitchen right here.
Yeah, and yes, Anne's pointing the cursor at her kitchen. That's all of her shelving and storage and work area right up there. This family would be considered reasonably well off. So they have a lot of storage space here, and pictures and decorative things, and probably this up here and up here, they're decoration, but they're also Mongolians will also put their educational qualifications on things like that. So you can, I hope you've seen, Anne and I really enjoy Mongolia. We enjoy the countryside, we enjoy the people. Just some scenes from around. This is up in the north of Mongolia. There's a lot more trees there. This is a little bit further south and not too many trees. The trees tend to grow just on the north-facing slopes of the hills. The south-facing slopes tend to be too burnt by the sunshine. Okay.
How do you make a fire in that? How would you cook if you lived there?
Okay, yes. This is an area that Anne and I spent our first summer in. We'd arrived in 2004. We studied language for the first winter, and then we went to the countryside as a language immersion. So we were staying in a ger, and we had a stove like that. That's what our food preparation was done on. But here in Canada, you've got so much nice wood to burn and so on if you need to. But in a place like this, what would you use for fuel? Cow, horse, yak dung. And does any of you know which is the better?
Yak. Yak.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
know.
We learned to discriminate. Yeah. Yak is the better for burning in a stove. Horse will give you more heat, but doesn't last as long. And cow, it kind of depends. You do learn to be very aware of how the relative dryness when you're collecting the stuff. Okay, as Anne said, Mongolia's southern half is part of the Gobi or semi-Gobi desert there. So a lot of sand. This area right here is called, it's from the Flaming Cliffs. If any of you are archaeologists or paleontologists, this was one of the areas in Mongolia where dinosaur bones were first discovered by Roy Andrews Chapman just early in the 1900s. Just some more scenery from around. In Mongolia, as was said in the introduction, Anne and I work with an organization called JCS International.
Just angle it, angle it, angle it.
Yeah, I'm getting a red light here. So the battery's going.
End of our talking time.
That's a unique way to cut off a speaker. I'm not. Anyway, a number of things that we do are just. First, we're there as a relief agency, and there's a number of things that result from natural disaster. So we do provide aid in the times when it's needed, and with the people that it's needed. We also do a lot of follow-up development. So the picture of the gardening, this was started as a follow-up to some of the large natural disasters. A disaster in Mongolia is in the wintertime, too much snow, or in the summertime, drought. You can imagine with the country of about 60-some million animals, if there's drought or if there's too much snow, there's a lot of animals die. So when that happens, we try and help. And we can't help everybody, but we do help some. And a number of other organizations, we try and coordinate all of that. But one of the things we've done as follow-up is working with people to help them learn some other skills to help them diversify a little bit. So one of those was it was initially called the Kitchen Garden Project, and it was teaching people some gardening skills, providing them with some basic information, tools, and seeds and know-how to get started, and working with a group of people, and they could then continue into a cooperative. And so
That organization, that project actually spun off and is now an independent organization that continues to do this around the country with funding from 2 or 3 other organizations, and we continue to work with them. This was a relief project in the city. Mongolia has tremendous problems with especially alcohol addiction, but as the economy is developing, other addictions are occurring. And through JCS, there's been significant development of a couple of addictions recovery programs, and we're just we're glad that we have the opportunity to provide something useful into this country, this society. As Anne talked about, there's a number of very young people. As a Canadian, I was very pleased that about 6 years ago now, one of the activities that we were able to start for young people was we began using ice hockey. So in one of the cities outside of the capital, we have an ice hockey team and an ice hockey program, and I just really enjoy getting out to do a little bit of work with the program, with the kids, and we've recently sent another family out there, and they will be even expanding this program. Football has been another, or soccer, sorry, I'm in Canada, soccer has been another important activity and it's done both summer and winter. So JCS cooperates with government at all levels and many other civil groups. So this is at a conference that I attended with one of our short-term members just a year and a half ago, and none of you will recognize him, but the gentleman in the white hat here was at that time the president of Mongolia, and a little bit before this ceremony, actually, about 6 months before, I'd been at another function where President Elbegdorj met with Canada's Governor General, David Johnson, yeah. And so he was a pretty important guy, and he came and addressed the conference. It was a conference on environmental sustainability in Mongolia. Some of you who are involved in the extractive minerals sector may be familiar with Mongolia because of the mining that's done there. And environment has been a very big issue, and gets a lot of attention, especially in the capital city, Ulaanbaatar.
So they're planting trees.
Yeah, and this as part of this conference, we did some tree planting as a group. So
professional education.
Yeah, this is continuing in professional education. If you look closely, right here in the center, my wife, right next to her is one of her professors from Canada here, who was an instructor both in her undergrad and then also in her graduate program, and came to Mongolia and did some guest lecturing in qualitative research. The whole goal of JCS is to be able to share skills with people of Mongolia so that they can do for themselves what, in the future, what we're helping them learn now. Okay?
English.
Yeah, this is an English course. This is actually the pictures from one that my wife was teaching, and she had some little dolls made by another project, so that as she's teaching nurses various English terms for turn right, turn left, raise your leg, raise your arm, and so on.